All right, everybody, welcome back for another deep dive with us.
Yeah.
Today, we're going to be diving into something a little bit different. We're taking a look at a recent news story that caught our eye.
Yeah, this is an interesting one. I think we're going to learn a lot here.
Yeah, and it's a story that I think really kind of brings together a lot of different threads that we've been talking about on the show.
Yeah, definitely geopolitics, economics, and these really important critical resources. It all comes together in this one.
Yeah, and we're talking about Ukraine, but not the Ukraine story that you're probably used to hearing about.
Right, not just the conflict,
Right, exactly.
but the under the surface kind of stuff.
Yeah, the stuff that's really driving a lot of the global dynamics that we see playing out.
Yeah, exactly. And what's really interesting is that this war has kind of thrown a spotlight on something that I think a lot of people didn't realize, which is that Ukraine is sitting on a ton of very valuable resources.
Yeah, and we're not talking about just like your run-of-the-mill, iron or coal or something like
All
that.
right, this is the good stuff.
This is the stuff that powers our phones and our computers and, all the technology that we rely on every day.
Yeah, lithium, cobalt, rare earth metals. All the things that are really hard to get your hands on these days.
Exactly, and that's why this story is so important, because it really gets at this question of who controls these resources and what are the implications of that control.
Right, and how does that control shift and change during a time of war?
Right. Yeah, because we're talking about a country that is literally fighting for its survival.
Yeah.
And at the same time, it's also sitting on this treasure trove of resources that everybody wants.
Yeah. And so, you've got this really complex situation where you have to balance those two things. The need to defend your country and also the potential to use those resources to rebuild.
Yeah, and that's exactly what makes this recent news story so fascinating.
Yeah.
Because it really gets at the heart of that tension. We saw headlines about Zelensky, going to the White House and meeting with the president.
Right.
And, initially I think a lot of people thought, oh, this is going to be about another aid package or something like that.
Right.
But then all of a sudden we get this news that he actually walked away from a deal with the U.S.
Yeah, a deal that was specifically about these mineral resources.
Right, and that's what really caught my eye, because I thought, why would he do that?
Right. Why walk away from a deal that seems like it would be really beneficial for Ukraine at a time when they really need it?
Exactly, and so that's what we're going to be diving into today. We're going to be trying to understand why Zelensky walked away from this deal.
Right.
What were the terms of the deal? What were the implications? And what does this tell us about the broader geopolitical landscape that we're living in?
Yeah, I think it's really going to give us some insight into how these things are playing out behind the scenes.
So let's start by taking a closer look at this deal. So as we understand it, the U.S. was proposing to invest billions of dollars in Ukraine's mining sector.
Right, billions with a B.
Billions with a B.
Ah.
And the idea was that this investment would help to modernize Ukraine's mining infrastructure.
Yeah, help them to, extract these minerals more efficiently and get them to market.
Right, and so on the surface, this sounds like a pretty good deal, right?
Yeah, that's like a win-win. Ukraine gets this huge influx of investment. They're able to develop their mining sector. They're able to create jobs.
And the U.S. gets access to these critical resources that they need.
Right, without having to rely on China.
Right, exactly. Because right now, as we've talked about before, China really controls the market for a lot of these minerals.
Yeah, they've been very strategic about it.
They have. Yeah, they've been playing the long game.
Yeah.
They've been investing in mines all over the world.
And they control a lot of the processing and refining capacity, too.
Right, so they're not just digging the stuff out of the ground. They're also the ones who are turning it into the materials that we actually use.
Yeah, so they've really got a stranglehold on the whole supply chain.
Yeah, and that's a big problem for the U.S. because it means that they're really dependent on China for a lot of these really important materials.
Yeah, especially as we move towards things like electric vehicles and renewable energy.
Right, because all of that technology requires these rare earth metals and these other critical minerals.
And if China controls the supply of those minerals, then they have a lot of leverage.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you can see why the U.S. would be really interested in securing access to these minerals from other sources.
Right.
And Ukraine seems like a pretty good option, right?
Yeah, I mean, they've got the resources. They're relatively close to Europe.
Your democracy?
Yeah, they're a democracy. They're,
Yeah.
Aligned with the West in a lot of ways.
So it seems like it would be a natural partnership.
Yeah, on paper it looks great.
Right. But then Zelensky says no.
Yeah, he walks away from the deal.
And that's the part that I just couldn't wrap my head around.
Yeah, I mean, what's going on there?
Yeah, because you got this country that is in desperate need of economic assistance.
Right.
And they're being offered billions of dollars.
And not just any dollars, right? This is investment in a sector that could really help to transform their economy.
Exactly. And yet they say no thanks.
Yeah, so there's got to be something more to the story.
Right. And so that's what we're going to try to figure out now.
Okay.
So what were Zelensky's reasons for walking away from this deal?
Well, from what we've been able to gather, it seems like he was concerned about a couple of things. One of the big ones was the issue of sovereignty.
Okay.
He felt like the terms of the deal would have given too much control to foreign companies.
Okay. So he's worried about, essentially selling off Ukraine's resources.
Yeah, essentially. Yeah. And, you can understand that perspective, right? Especially given everything that's going on right now.
Right. They're fighting a war against an invader who's trying to take their land.
Yeah. So the idea of then turning around and giving up control of your resources to another foreign power.
It's a tough sell.
It's a really tough sell.
Yeah. So I get that part. But on the other hand,
yeah,
they need the money.
They do. They need the money to rebuild. They need the money to fight the war.
So isn't this kind of a short-sighted decision in a way?
Well, that's what some people are saying.
Yeah.
They're arguing that Zelensky should have taken the deal, even if it meant making some concessions.
Because in the long run, it would have been better for Ukraine.
Right. The idea is that, get the investment, get the economy moving again, and then you can worry about sovereignty later.
Right.
But Zelensky clearly doesn't see it that way.
Yeah, he's taking a much longer-term view.
He is. He's saying, we're not going to sacrifice our control over our resources, even for a short-term gain.
Yeah, and I think that's a really interesting point because it really gets at this question of what is more important.
Right. Is it more important to have short-term economic growth, or is it more important to maintain control over your own destiny?
And in a way, it's kind of a classic dilemma, right?
It is. Yeah, it's something that countries have been grappling with for centuries.
Do you take the quick influx of cash or do you hold out for something better?
Right. And there's no easy answer.
There's no easy answer. And I think in this case, it's even more complicated because you have the war going on.
Right. Exactly. If there wasn't a war going on, maybe Zelensky would have made a different decision.
Maybe. Yeah, it's hard to say.
But the fact is that there is a war going on, and that changes everything.
It does.
Yeah.
It changes the calculus. It changes the risks. It changes the potential rewards.
And it also raises the stakes for everyone involved.
Right, because now it's not just about Ukraine and the U.S.
Now it's about the entire global balance of power.
Because as we've talked about, these minerals are essential for so many different technologies.
Yeah, everything from smartphones to electric vehicles to military hardware.
And so whoever controls those minerals has a lot of power.
They do.
Well,
and that's why this deal was so significant.
It was because it was a chance for the U.S. to break China's dominance in this market.
Right, and to secure access to these minerals for themselves.
And to support a key ally in the process.
Right, so it seemed like a win-win-win.
But it fell apart.
It did. And now the question is what happens next?
Yeah, because the U.S. still needs those minerals.
They do.
And Ukraine still needs help.
They do.
So what are the options?
Well, one option is that they try to renegotiate the deal.
Okay.
Maybe they can come up with terms that are more acceptable to both sides.
Right. Maybe Zelensky is willing to make some concessions if it means getting the investment that Ukraine needs.
Right. And maybe the U.S. is willing to give Ukraine more control over their resources in exchange for access.
So there's still potential for a deal.
There is, yeah, but it's going to be tricky.
It is, yeah, because both sides have to be willing to compromise.
And they both have to be careful not to alienate the other side.
Right, because if this deal falls apart completely, then it could have some really negative consequences.
Yeah, it could damage relations between the U.S. and Ukraine.
It could make it harder for the U.S. to secure these minerals from other sources.
And it could leave Ukraine even more vulnerable to Russian aggression.
Right, so the stakes are high.
They are very high.
So we'll have to see what happens.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to watch this play out.
It is, and I think it really just underscores the complexity of the situation that we're in.
Yeah. There are no easy answers here.
There are no easy answers, and I think that's something that we need to keep in mind as we try to navigate this new world order.
I agree.
So that's about all the time we have for today.
Yeah, that was a lot to unpack.
It was, but I think it was a really important conversation to have.
I agree.
And I think it leaves us with a lot to think about.
It does, yeah.
So I'm curious to hear what our listeners think.
Yeah.
Do you think Zelensky made the right decision by walking away from this deal?
Right. What are the trade-offs here?
Yeah, what are the long-term implications of this decision?
And what does it mean for the future of Ukraine, the U.S., and the global competition for these critical resources?
Yeah, those are all really big questions, and we don't have the answers, but I think it's important to keep asking them.
It is, and to keep learning and to keep engaging with these issues.
Exactly. So until next time, keep diving deep.
Yeah, keep digging. Keep those questions coming.
We'll see you all soon. Thanks for listening.
Thanks, everybody.